Welcome to Built to Win, the podcast created to help you level up your business game by developing a success mindset made for the long run. In this episode, Neora co-founder and president Amber Olson Rourke sits down with Dave Fleming to talk about escaping the drama triangle. They'll explain what the drama triangle is, how it's affecting your personal and business life, and how you can proactively shift your dynamic to move out of the drama and into empowerment.
Hello and welcome everybody back to the Built to Win podcast. We've got a great topic lined up today with the Neora co-founder and president, Amber Olson Rourke. And if you are new to this podcast, I would highly recommend that you go back, start from the beginning. This is a great podcast about leadership, about entrepreneurship, about living your best life. And we talk a lot about a broad context of different topics. And so, understanding where we are and where we're coming from and the things that we've talked about will be helpful as we talk about today's topic as well. But if you're here for today's topic and this is the first one you're listening to, welcome as well. You're going to get a lot out of this, even if you haven't listened to the first episodes. But I would highly recommend that you go back and listen to some of the first few to give a better perspective, better context about who we are and what this podcast is all about. And today, as I mentioned, we are talking with Neora co-founder and president Amber Olson Rourke, and we're talking about a really cool topic, something that you can use in literally every aspect of your life, whether it's professional, it's family, it's your personal relationships with people anywhere. But it's just super helpful, something that I've used personally, something I know that Amber's talked a lot about, and it's how to deal with drama, how to deal with conflict. And the key is having a tool and mindset, how to switch out of the drama, getting caught up in the emotion of the moment. And it's called the empowerment dynamic that gives context. And so, Amber, welcome back to the podcast. This is a really cool topic. Excited to talk about this. But for those that don't know about this, why don't we just start at the beginning, talk about what is it? What is this empowerment dynamic that we're talking about today?
This has been one of my go-to tools for a long time. I learned it in a class that I went to around how to be an effective leader. And it forever kind of changed my context of how I see situations. And it's really, you can use it in business, but it also just works in personal life. I can speak testament to it works great in marital dynamics as well. And so we're going to kind of give you the framework and then kind of walk through how you can actually use this. But it's really based around understanding roles that are happening. Anytime that there is drama happening, there are three primary roles that are happening, and they call it the drama triangle. So I did not make up this concept. I just use this as a tool and I love teaching it. So when you think about this drama triangle, it's important to understand that in any situation, none of these roles that I'm going to talk about are your true identity, right? You're not stuck in any of these roles. They're just how you might be choosing to show up in that particular situation. And so if you're choosing to show up a certain way, guess what? You can choose to show up a different way. So there's these three roles that I'm going to quickly go through because this is kind of important to be able to understand this whole dynamic. So the starring role in drama is a victim. Right. A victim sees themselves as life is happening to them, right? They are being harmed. They are powerless to change the outcome. They are unwilling to take responsibility for their life. And so they really have this view of any situation as that happening to them, as them being wronged. And they are the star in their own drama. And so a lot of drama starts there. Someone feels like they're the victim of a situation. And then they place blame. So if you don't take responsibility, the opposite of taking responsibility is placing blame. And so when you're in a victim mindset, you're going to place blame on a persecutor, which is the second role. A persecutor, that can be either a person or a situation, a life circumstance. You're placing the blame on that. It's your boss, or it's the economy, or it's this situation, but you're now the blame of why you are where you are is placed to that persecutor. And so in that situation, since again, the victim sees themselves as powerless, they look for a rescuer, someone who is going to save them from this situation. That is usually a person, but it also can be found in forms of escapism, whether that's binge scrolling or turning to things that aren't healthy, just we're trying to escape the situation. But when we're talking about it in terms of a person, the rescuer is somebody who seems to want to help the victim. They want to help fix this situation. They want to help fix the wrong. But the important distinction is usually they're doing this because they have a need to be seen. They're doing it not to help get the victim out of this situation, but really because they want to feel like they fixed it. They want to feel needed. They want to be seen for, being such a great rescuer. The thing about being a rescuer is when you fix things for other people, it robs them of the opportunity to learn from their own choices. So those are the kind of starting framework. You have usually a victim that has something that's persecuted them, and then you have the rescuer trying to save the victim. And this goes in the triangle, which is why they call it a drama triangle.
I love that. Now, okay, so you've got the victim, the rescuer, the persecutor, and I think people probably understand all of those words, but to help people understand, like bring this concept home, why don't we talk through some examples of how this might play out in real life? Because this is something that I wish that I had learned, before I had 4 kids, because it's been really effective. It's been super effective with the younger kids that I learned after I learned this. But yeah, I know you've got lots of real life examples as a mom, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, like walk through some examples with us, maybe bring this home so people understand, like, how does this play out in real life?
Yeah. And what's crazy is once you start having the awareness of this dynamic, like you see it show up on a daily, like in work situations and home life situations. So here's one example that could happen. Say somebody's boss gives them feedback that they didn't want to hear. So it's feedback that, about how they could have done something better. And because that person is choosing a victim role in that situation, right? They now are thinking, why is my boss always, not supporting me, giving me negative feedback? So they've chosen, instead of taking that feedback as something that is constructive and something that is meant to help them achieve their goals, they're taking it and making it personal. And by doing that, they're looking at their boss as the persecutor, the one who has harmed them. And then usually they're going to seek out, maybe it's a coworker, to rescue them, to say, oh, your boss is crazy. They don't know what they're talking about, right? Someone to kind of change the situation for them. And this is, a dynamic you see a lot of times in work and leadership. But it's also important to understand that you yourself can switch between these roles all in one situation, even without anybody involved. So there's some times where there's multiple people involved, but here's one where I think plays out in a lot of marriages, as least true for me. So this is like a real life example, right? So say you did something to help, quote unquote, help your husband without them being asked. So you're trying to be helpful, right? But you're doing it because you want that recognition of you're helping, you're doing this. Well, no one asked for that help, but you're the rescuer. So you're here to rescue, you're helping. And then because we're helping to get that praise or get that recognition, and then you don't get it, you then quickly go from being the rescuer of the situation to the victim. Like, why doesn't anyone appreciate me? Why does no one thank me? Right. And then you can quickly switch from being the victim to being mad about it. Like, no one around here, appreciates me. And so in this one example, we've played ourselves, all 3 roles all in one.
That is amazing, because you can see that play out, and that thought process that you just described. Like I can think of examples like within the last 30 days where I was. So it's not like you learn this and then suddenly everything is
right.
fantastic. Like you got it nailed and dialed in. But so in the moment, like how do you do? Because obviously awareness is the starting point. Like you've got to be aware. Like you can't adjust things. You can't modify things if you're not aware of them. So if that's the starting point, like how do you become aware of what role you're playing? And then I guess the follow up to that is then how do you switch? Like how do you change that?
Yeah, I think, what you said is exactly right. You never probably master this, but I think most people aren't even aware that they're in this drama triangle, and they're just kind of spinning in it, and they don't even recognize it. And they end up feeling frustrated and burnt out because they can't get themselves out of this drama triangle. So awareness is really that key starting point. And I'm going to get to some tips to how to help identify and then decide to switch the role that you're playing to a role that's more empowering. Because Here's a base concept that's really important to understand. Every role in that drama triangle, whether it's the victim, the persecutor, or the rescuer, all of those roles are anxiety based and problem focused. So when you are in the feeling of anxiousness, that might be a clue. When you are constantly talking and thinking about problems, like you're just marinating on the problem and not really the solution to the problem, and you're like just trying to pull people into pointing out the problem. Isn't this a problem? Isn't this a problem? Those are some clues to yourself that you might not be in that empowerment dynamic. So the goal is to switch into more of an empowerment role. And when you're in an empowerment role, you're really operating not out of fear, not out of anxiousness, but out of passion. You're fueled by what you're trying to create. You're really focused on the outcome. So those are some things when you just think about your thoughts of the day, or when you find yourself marinating on a problem or feeling any feeling that doesn't feel great, it's probably in the drama triangle. And when you're thinking on your passions and the outcomes you want to create, that's more in the empowerment. So here's some clues of like language and feelings. So you might be in a victim mindset when you feel wronged, like that person wronged me, right? And you very well might be right. They did wrong you, but you still get a choice to decide what you do with that information. And if what you do with that information is make it, where you are now the victim and there's nothing you could do about it, that's not empowering, right? It leaves you in this like hopeless state of being. When you feel overwhelmed, right? Why is this happening to me? That's the question people like to ask. Like, why is that happening to me? That's kind of like the ultimate victim mindset question is why me? Or I don't know what to do. Why don't things ever go my way? Right? Those are all kinds of thoughts where we can stop ourselves and think, is this thought serving me? I always love that question because again, if you're approaching a situation with a victim mindset, doesn't mean that you are a victim. You aren't these things. It's how your mindset is in that moment, and you can choose to change it. Now, for a persecutor, some clues that you might be showing up to that situation as a persecutor is when you're assigning blame, approaching things from a self-righteous standpoint where, you're the best, everyone else messes things up. And when you start to feel threatened or defensive or angry, those emotions can be tied to that. So, maybe you're working together in a team and it's like, why? What were you thinking? Why did you make that mistake? Or sometimes, as a mom, it's like, I do everything around here. No one appreciates me. My team isn't working as hard as I am, right? You're putting yourself in this elevated state and thinking that everyone else isn't rising to the occasion that you are. And then the rescuer is when you're seeing a situation and you instantly think about how you're going to fix it. And you're trying to shield people from the consequences of their own decisions. Telling people, oh, don't worry, I'll fix this for you. Or even not being willing to have conflict in a conversation because you don't want to have conflict. You want to fix it, right? You want to rescue the situation. And so again, I always like to re-stress that these are not static states that define you. But there's usually one that people naturally gravitate to more. Like for me, it was 100% being a rescuer. And I always in my mind saw that as helpful. And I approached that even with my team where they would make a mistake, say on a project or something important. And I would get in there and try and fix it for them. I would try and fix the project or fix the problem because I didn't want them to look bad, or I didn't want them to be embarrassed, or I didn't want them, whatever it was, right? And it wasn't until I learned this and learned that that was actually very disempowering for them. Because what I was unconsciously saying is that I am more capable of fixing your problem than you are. And by doing that, it puts them in a state where they're dependent on me, which is not where is empowering for them. And they're not learning how to be a problem solver themselves. And so when I finally had this realization, I think it completely changed how I lead people.
For sure. And I think people who listen to this podcast probably will find themselves naturally more in that role than in the role of the victim or in the role of the persecutor necessarily, because I think it's almost a trap that you can fall into as a leader is that
Yeah.
people look to you to be the rescuer,
Right.
and then you rescue, and then you create this kind of this tailspin of they become more and more dependent and less empowered, and you become more of a rescuer, and then you're like, wait, how
Right.
did we
And then you're
get here?
frustrated. Like, why aren't they doing it? It's like, well,
Right.
because you created this whole dynamic where they're not.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it's like you have to really be aware, really truly self-aware to be able to step back and say, oh my gosh, I've created this and now I've got to disentangle this. And that creates more work long term,
Mhm.
even though it's so tempting sometimes to be the rescuer and just show up and be like, got it, I can fix this. Because most people in leadership positions feel like they can, but
Right.
that's not necessarily the most serving. It's not necessarily
Right.
the most helpful thing.
It's that quote of like, a true leader creates other leaders, not just followers. I think that's a perfect, example of that.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, that was a great quote. I think we've mentioned that on this podcast before, but that's what true leadership is not having all the answers, because I mean, like, let's be honest, none of us has all the answers. And to be in a position where we have to is only setting ourselves and our team and our organizations up for failure. And we don't want that.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about awareness, and we've talked about how to understand where we are and how we show up in the drama triangle, which I would love it if they changed the name to anti-drama triangle, but that's for different that's my own 2 cents. Okay, but so how do you proactively shift? Because I think at this point you're probably not even necessarily consciously making that shift because you've done this naturally so long. But for people who are just getting started or maybe new to this concept, what are the steps? Like, how do you shift that empowerment dynamic from, from moving out of rescuer or persecutor or victim for that matter?
This is probably the reason that I love this concept the most, because it is so simple to do. So, first of all, the framework of thinking is when you find yourself asking, whose fault is it? Why did this happen? Those kinds of questions, and you realize that those aren't the right questions. You flip the question, because the question really is not whose fault is it? Why is this happening? The question is, what do you want? What do you want? And who do you want to be? Seems very simple, but you can't answer those questions when you're stuck in the drama triangle. And so getting yourself back to reorienting yourself back to those questions is such a tried and true and simple thing. So it's a very simple formula. You're going to write 3 things down. Anytime you're feeling yourself, you're in this drama triangle, you want to get yourself out. This is what you write down. What is the problem? So that's the first thing. What is the problem? Second, what is it that I ultimately want? And then third, what is one action I can take right now that will move me closer to my desired outcome? And I think that third part is the most important part. And I want you to notice that I just said one action that brings you closer. I think some people get stuck here where they have a problem, they know what they want, and then they're trying to solve the entire problem or get all the way to where they want. And that's too big. You need to make it, in the terms of the slight edge, that one step that you can take. Because if you can get yourself taking an action right then and there, that action is likely not going to solve the whole problem. That action is likely not going to get you all the way to where you want to go. But by moving into the action that is moving you in the direction of your outcome, you have now automatically switched yourself back to empowerment mode. So here's an example, right? So you helped Sarah with her project, some project, work project, or whatever, and she didn't thank you. That hurt your feelings, right? So that's the problem that you have. You're trying to like get out of, how do I get out of my feelings about it? Then you think about, well, what is it that I really want? Well, Sarah's a part of my team. I helped her so that she could have success, because ultimately what I want is for the team to be successful and achieve $100,000 in sales, right? Whatever the goal is. So I'm reorienting to what is my actual goal. Now, can I get to 100,000 in sales even if Sarah doesn't thank me? Yeah, for sure I can, right? So what one step can I take, regardless of what Sarah does or doesn't do, that's going to get me closer to the actual outcome, the $100,000 in sales? Okay, I can set up a sales event for tomorrow to help my team close more sales. And I'm going to schedule that event. just by scheduling that event, I've now moved out of thinking about, am I the victim of what Sarah did or didn't do and getting caught in that drama triangle? And I've reoriented myself towards what I'm actually trying to achieve. And I've taken a step to do that. And now I am in empowerment momentum.
That's really good advice. And I love that there's this shift of the dynamic goes from, problem focused to outcome focused.
Yes.
And I think that, just like you said, that's the key to doing this successfully is, and I was joking about the anti-drama triangle, but there actually is an anti-drama triangle.
Yeah.
It's the empowerment dynamic, right? It's like there's an opposite to everything. So there's an opposite to the victim, there's an opposite to the persecutor, but so how do you flip like there's an empowerment dynamic that's the opposite of the drama triangle. So walk us through that. Like what's the ideal empowerment dynamic as opposed to the drama triangle?
Yes. So what's really interesting is there's a corresponding role to each of these drama triangle roles. And all of them, like you mentioned, are focused on getting back into creation and getting back into outcome. So for the victim role, the antidote to that, or the other choice to that, is to be a creator. Because a creator, they are the central role of this triangle, just like the victim is the central role of the drama. The creator is the central role of empowerment. Because a creator does a couple things. A creator takes responsibility. I learned a long time ago that having ultimate responsibility, like the buck truly stops with me, that seems scary at first until you do it. And then it's so freeing because you don't feel like you're at the mercy of any situation, any person. Doesn't matter what situation or dynamic or climate or person does, you still have that responsibility. So a creator takes responsibility. They claim and tap into their own personal power to be able to choose their response to a circumstance. Being in the empowerment dynamic doesn't mean that crappy things aren't going to happen. They're still going to happen. There's going to be things
Right.
happen that you do not like, right? But you get to have a choice in that response. You're not powerless. And creators are very result and goal oriented. So they're focused on their desired outcomes. And they're real. It's not about kind of being Pollyanna, rainbow, everything's great. You have to be kind of real and conscious about what is your current reality, of course, but their decisions and their actions or their thoughts are all around moving toward the life that they intend to create. A creator sees obstacles and challenges as not something happening to them, but happening for them so that they can learn something. One of my favorite questions, instead of why is this happening to me, is what is this teaching me? I promise that everything that happens, you can learn a lesson from. And that lesson, you'll be surprised when you can't even, you don't know what the future holds, but as you live longer and longer, you see, oh, that's why I learned that lesson. I need that lesson right here in this moment. So it's switching into that creative mode that you're creating. You're not just focused on problems, you're focused on creation. And along the way, creators usually meet up with a challenger. And a challenger is the antidote to being a persecutor, right? A persecutor is one who's assigning blame, thinking people don't measure up. The difference of a challenger is they are focused on evoking that will to create in other people. They're helping challenge that creator to learn a new skill, challenging them to make a difficult decision, challenging them to do whatever is necessary to achieve their dream, right? So how this shows up is as a challenger and you're working with someone who's trying to create something, you help cast a bigger vision. You say, this is an opportunity for you to lead. You don't need me to lead. This is an opportunity for you to lead. Or you might be seeing something where, they need to do something differently to be able to achieve their dreams. Something like, I know that you can show up more consistently for yourself and for your dreams than you are right now. So you're challenging them, but it's coming from a place of, because they can do it. When you see people as a victim, you're approaching them as if they can't do it. When you see people as a creator, you're approaching them in love, seeing before they see themselves that they can do it. And then the last shift for a rescuer, which was my default, was into a coach. So instead of solving people's problems for them, encouraging them on how they can solve their own problems, because that is the most empowering thing for them. And here's a big thing difference between being a rescuer and a coach is you are not attached to the outcome. As a rescuer, my feelings are hurt if they don't take my advice or if they don't praise what I told them to, praise what I did for them. And in this, as a coach, you're not attached to how they respond. You're not attached to how they take your advice. And as a coach, you're asking good questions. You're asking them how they can solve their own problem. Things like, okay, they tell you a problem. I do this with my team all the time. They tell me a problem. I say, okay, what do you think the options are here? Like, what do you think you should do? Or there's a situation that's, has a conflict situation. Okay, what can you do to improve the situation? So you're trying to help people, become better at their creative empowerment mindset by challenging them and coaching them to that.
That's awesome. And man, several things that I want to highlight that you just were talking about. Number one, I love when you said, and hopefully people that were listening caught this because it's subtle, but things happening for you, not happening to you, is such a powerful mindset. Like if you can realize, oh, this is happening for a reason, or not happening for a reason, but it's not happening to me. It puts you in such a different dynamic in terms of like empowerment. The other one that is super, super cool. I love the question, like, what do you see as your options here? Or what do you think we can do about this? In terms of empowerment and as a leader, if you're a team leader, or if you're a CEO, or if you're running your own business, frequently people look to you to be the rescuer. And just that one question can be so powerful, because I think so often people come to you with an expectation that you're going to rescue them, you're going to solve the problem. But by flipping that, it puts them in a position where they start to have to think about solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, and we've said here before, like like Jeff's famous for saying, like two minds together create a third more powerful mind. And that's what can happen when you put that into practice, which is super, super cool. And I love that part of the empowerment dynamic. So for the people who are listening, new to this, or just people who want to get better at this, what are some tips that you'd offer to help them make those shifts?
So the first thing I think is to have a slight edge approach. And if you haven't listened to the Slight Edge podcast on here, the episode on this podcast, I definitely would encourage you to do that, because it's not about this quantum leap where you're going to like, oh, now I'm going to just totally fix everything and do it. It's it's a journey, right? And you just are trying to create better and better awareness and create a habit of trying to make that switch. So giving yourself that grace and just focusing on a little bit at a time. How can you, for example, if you find yourself more in a victim mindset, how can you do little things every day that inspire you to create something, that inspire you to be focused on a goal? And it doesn't have to be, okay, I'm going to set these huge goals for every area of my life. Can you create a goal around one area of your life and then focus on how you're going to create that? And just those little things are going to start adding up. So have that slight edge approach, focus on that awareness. Anytime you're feeling a yuck feeling, then it's usually a sign that you're in that drama triangle, because that's what the drama elicits, is that yuck feelings. And so practice that awareness and then just write down those questions. That is what I've never let go of. I still write it down. You can, of course, think it in your head, but it's actually a lot more powerful if you write it down, because writing creates clarity. And then actually when you read it and look at it, a piece of a paper, sometimes it like makes it seem how silly it probably is. Like you're looking at it like, okay, I can just get over that after you've written it down. Because we get in this like hamster wheel in our head. Once we put it to paper, just that act alone is more discerning. But the questions of what is the problem and what do I actually want and what is the one step that I can take? Like if you just do that one thing, it really takes care of a lot of the things.
That's great. And I love that too. And I'm a big fan of writing. There's an old Chinese idiom that says the dullest pencil is sharper than the best memory. And I think that's kind of a great way to live. But you're right. Like as soon as you put it down on paper, then it's an outlet. It's out of your mind and it stops bouncing around, creating those other thoughts. But that's some great advice hopefully listeners, you've been taking good notes. There's a lot in here to digest, but I think it's like there's some things that you can apply today and start shifting from the drama triangle into an empowerment dynamic. So Amber, thanks so much for walking us through this. It's been super, super helpful.
It's been fun. I love this. I love this topic.
And it shows, and I think in people who've worked with you, and then you're good at it as well. So you're a great coach to help people walk through this. Until next time, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on another episode of Built to Win.
That was Amber Olson Rourke and Dave Fleming talking about escaping the drama triangle and moving into a position of empowerment. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you learned something from it, please share it with a friend or colleague who you think would also benefit. And if you're new to Built to Win, we invite you to go back and listen to our story from the beginning. You can find us wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And while you're there, please rate us and leave a review to let us know what you think of the show.